Hello, I'm Chaz Hamaker, and today I'm going to be talking about my upcoming paper on the novel Animals People by Indra Sinha, Orientalism and what I call versatile deprecation of Orientalism. So to understand this video and my paper, you have to have read Animals People by Indra Sinha. Just a little background on Sinha. He's a British writer of Indian descent, which might be important to keep in mind since many of the ideas I'll be discussing in the video have to do with diasporic Indian authors. So in my paper, I'm going to be talking about Orientalism a lot and the many different forms that it presents itself in, mostly again through what I call versatile deprecation. Um, my ideas in this, which I'll mention in a bit, come from Edward Said's ideas on how hegemony can, uh, found in Orientalism, can be flexible, and how authoritarian perpetuators of Orientalism tend to project their views of the West and therefore themselves onto the others that they're so critical of. So my thesis is that through a close reading of Animals People, it becomes apparent that while Reorientalism provides a more authentic voice for the other, it simultaneously perpetuates the lingering hegemony of colonialism by refusing to forego the versatile deprecation of Orientalism. Um, what I mean by this and what I hope to clear up in my paper is this. Uh, what I mean by versatile deprecation is oftentimes when we see a sort of hegemonic discourse, it is often thought that like the authoritarian's role is that of someone who blatantly states that the other is inferior to them and that the colonial's ways are better than the ways of the other, and that the other needs to change their ways in order to be more like the authoritarian. Now, while this is a form of deprecation, which I would attribute to what I might refer to as a classical Orientalist, someone like Ma Francie, who thinks Indian people communicate like animals, there are other ways in which deprecation can be utilized, either by the authoritarian as a sort of false deprecation, in where they put on a sort of performance or presentation of relinquishing of power in order to benefit from the other in some way before returning to the safety of their hegemonic power. An example of this would be the journalist at the beginning of the novel who attempts to humble himself before Animal in order to get Animal's story, after which he doesn't. He returns to his authoritative position. Another example of self deprecation is when the other relinquishes a piece of their identity in order to gain a compromised position of power that's still under the hegemony of the authoritarian. Somewhat kind of like the British Indian soldiers you see here. They're sort of like colonized colonizers, which is definitely what I would consider a form of self deprecation. So here are the central debates that I'm planning on using for my so far for my paper. One big idea that I'm planning on criticizing is this idea of reorientalism. So this is the idea that the other is able to use their otherness as a platform to create a meta narrative that criticizes Orientalism. The problem with this that I want to point out is that it's still unable to function without the use of fabricated images attributed to the hegemony of the West. So it relies on the reorientalists to sort of self-deprecate. Um, I'll also be focusing on the idea of the cosmopolitan and language, as these concepts sort of bring to question how culture can be authentically presented to someone outside of it without uh, to an extent of like how much it can be presented to someone from outside the culture without any form of deprecation on either side is something I want to kind of focus on. Um, there's also the translation of culture and the use of the colonial tongue. So kind of like what I said before, except this is more of a question of whether or not the author writing in a language that's not their own and that's authoritarian can be like good at writing it or not. Animals People definitely addresses this. However, like in another type of it's another type of self-deprecation where there are a lot of like misspellings in animals people which are done on purpose and definitely show that the title character is not speaking his own language. However, it's inferred through a sort of relinquishing of the skill of his native tongue, that he's doing this. Another important element uh, that I want to go over is the voyeurism of the poor other. This goes back to the idea of projections in a way, in that the authoritarian lack, the authoritarian and their lack of hardships, they kind of project that onto the others, fulfilled hardships as a way to satisfy themselves. And what I mean by this is that through the other's lack of luxury, this lack of something is actually something that the that the authoritarian doesn't have. So another way to say this is that the other has nothing, while the authoritarian does not have nothing. So they want that thing that the other has, which is nothing. Um, which again would be like a form of self-deprecation in a way, and uh, because they disapprove of their own lack of having nothing. Um, so they fulfill this lack of having nothing through their voyeurism by watching other people that actually don't have anything. Um, so why is all of this important to social justice? Um, well, the idea of self-deprecation as it relates to the perpetuation of Orientalism can be seen in the lingering hegemony of colonialism and the relinquishing of authenticity in exchange for a compromised representation and false humility or self-deprecation through the utilization of power. When I say lingering hegemony of colonialism, I mean like the self-deprecating acceptance of having to cater to the fabricated images of Orientalism, as we can see happen with like re-Orientalism. There's also usually common interest, such as re-Orientalists wanting to present Orientalists, but like in a deprecating light, as the oppressive authoritarian, and the Orientalists wanting to represent the re-Orientalists as the other in an unequal exchange in this, as we can see in Animals, People, where the journalist wants animals' invaluable story without an invaluable exchange. Um, which brings me to my next point, which is the relinquishing of authenticity in exchange for a compromised representation. Um, we can see this with Animal's speech, where he chooses to speak in his broken English instead of his fluent Hindi in order to reach the authoritarian broader audience. We can also see it when he has to briefly explain Kafpuri customs in a way that a broad and unfamiliar audience can understand, and how Animal knew that his story would have to be compromised by the journalist who was willing to pay a small amount for the story, which is why he didn't give it to him. Finally, on the authoritarian side of this, we have the false humanity or self-deprecation through the utilization of power. This also exemplifies the journalist, or this is also exemplified by the journalist who acts respectful uh, and is willing to pay Animal um, in an attempt to show that he's relinquishing his hegemony to meet Animal where he's at. However, like we know that this is not a true relinquishing of power, as the flexibility of Orientalism's hegemony allows for his versatility in his self-deprecating act, um, to sort of return to his authoritarian position. This also allows characters like Ma Francie to act like the Indian people do not see her as human, when she is really just projecting her own feelings towards them as animals onto herself. And in this self-deprecating cry for empathy by the others, And uh, another and finally, this shows how the journalist says hello in Hindi upon, he says namaste to animal upon meeting him, in an attempt to show that he's appreciative of the other in their language, which is just a way for him to falsely lower himself in order to enjoy his voyeuristic view of animal. So that's all I have for now. Thank you for listening, and please let me know what you think. Yeah, thank you.